Hello, welcome to the quarterly Close Community Coalition meeting. We are here in room A15 of the Longmeadow Public Schools Central Office. Come and join us if you're nearby. And we'd love to go around and have folks introduce themselves by name and by sector that they represent, if they're a young person, if they are from the healthcare sector or recovery community example, or a parent. We'll start that way, and then we'll get into our agenda for providing substance prevention services in the community of Longmeadow. I'll start with myself. So I'm Paul McNeil. I am the coalition coordinator here. We are in year 5. We're just about to wrap up year 5. We have 2 weeks left, and then we'll talk about this in a little bit. But we've just been awarded 5 more years by the CDC to do prevention programming for the town of Longmeadow. So that's what I've been coordinating for the last 5 years. I love working in this community. I love working in prevention, and I'm really excited to host folks tonight.
My name is Ria, and I'm a senior at LHS, and I represent the student sector.
My name is Grace. I'm a junior at LHS, and I represent the student sector.
Do you want to go too, or do you want to pass?
Oh no, I'm just here as a parent observer.
Parent observer. Okay, you can be a parent participant within seconds if you want.
I would be odd being the only one here who doesn't feel affiliated.
Oh no, I mean
it's open to the
I'd
community.
Like to observe. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you got it.
So I am Barbara Gallo, and I am here representing the recovery sector.
I'm Lisa Taylor Kelly. I'm here as a parent, and I'm also professionally a pediatrician.
I'm Shelley Warren. I represent the school sector. I'm also a parent, and I work at the schools as a substance use response coordinator.
Thank you. Thanks for coming and joining us tonight. Our meeting should last about an hour, and if it runs over, you guys are welcome to take off if you need to, but if things are rolling over because of dialogue or conversation, feel free to stick around. I'm going to pass these around to Ria. Thanks so much. We'll reference this in a little bit, but this is our annual report. It's our one-pager that parents at the high school and middle schools have access to as they started the school year, just sort of giving everyone an update as to what we've been doing and what we will do in the next year. Today's meeting is really looking at qualitative and quantitative data that was collected over the last year, over the last 4 months in particular, and how they'll drive strategies forward. The attendees tonight are going to help influence decision making around what strategies to focus on to address particular substance issues and particular risk factors in town. Thank you. That's our agenda for today. We have an item of business before that, which is to present our close community board slate, and to have that voted on and yayed or nayed and approved by the attendees in this meeting. We have 2022-2023 close community board slate to include Ria Sandler, LHS senior, class of 2023. Candace Healy works with Holyoke Public Schools, is also a parent. Amy Higgins, who works with Mass Mutual, is also a parent. Chris Rich works with Longmeadow Safe Homes Network, also a parent and a life coach. Dr. Gila Sabetti, Western New England University neuropharmacology professor. Dr. Lisa Kelly, Bay State Health Systems and pediatrician locally. And Shelley Warren, she's been our board president for years, Longmeadow Public Schools, parent and licensed independent clinical social worker. So let's do it.
All right, so this is just an aye or nay, and we tend to vote, for those of you who don't know, and most of you I think are new to the board process actually, so our board, according to our bylaws, is a 1-year position on the board. So every year what we do is we have the current board decide who's staying on and who they'd like to recommend and reach out to for new board membership and who is ready to step off. So it's a 1-year term, but there's no limit on being able to stay on if people wish to. So many of our board members are returning members, and at the end of that year's time, they recommend new people who they would like to see step on as other people go. So we lost like 4 student representatives to graduation last year. So anyway. this is our new slate. They recommend to the coalition at a coalition meeting for approval. We tend to approve as a whole slate. We don't go into, one person at a time. So I'll open it up and come on in. I'll open it up and basically we can discuss if there's anything to discuss, and otherwise if there's a motion to vote on the slate, we can first and second it, and then it's an aye or a nay for after that. So, hi. We're just about to vote on the slate of board members. So is there anybody who would like to make a motion to either discuss or to vote?
Raise your hands if you're one of those people, go down it again.
So
Sure, yeah.
Rhea,
Rhea's here.
Candace is not here. Amy is
Amy's here.
Chris Rich. Dr. Sept is not here tonight. Dr. Kelly is here, and I'm here.
And I am not on the board.
And you're not on the board.
I am supervised by the board.
Correct. So,
I'll make a motion to vote on the slate.
all right, that's second. Okay. All in favor of accepting the slate of board members for next year? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Okay, our business there is done.
Thank
For
you,
those of
Shelley.
you who are here on the board, I will be in touch for a first new board meeting in October, and we can kind of look at what the format for the board is for the year, and then choose like a meeting schedule that makes sense based on new members coming in. So look for that soon.
Thanks so much, Shelley. Thank you, board members who are present. We're going to jump right into the surveys that we administered in the spring at LHS and both middle schools, the school climate surveys. We're going to start with LHS and take some of the quantitative data that was collected and look at the risk factors and substance use rates of interest and of note, and then we're going to we'll discuss in this group possible strategies to address those needs. And so we had 80% of the LHS student body complete school climate surveys in the spring of 2022, 732 valid surveys, and here's some of the results. I wanted to start with some risk factors first, like stress, reported stress, students feeling overwhelmed, and then the reported use of substances to cope with stress and anxiety. We see numbers since 2017 here, and numbers were going down sort of at the beginning of the pandemic, and then I think as students are reacclimating to in-person school, it seems like stress has gone up. Students feeling overwhelmed again in the last year, so there's been a bump up. Use of substances wasn't asked about in 2022, but that was on the way down. 12th graders, 11% of 12th graders reported substance use to cope with stress. 17% of 11th graders reported substance use to cope with stress. So those numbers were significantly higher than the average aggregate student body data.
What time in the year is that? What
Survey?
month?
It's late March, early April, so it's right before April break. And the reason for that is you don't want to ask too closely to the holiday break because substance use rates are particularly skewed for whatever reason in those months, in that month and a half. And then you don't want to get too close to April break because April break would affect substance use potentially. And so we've done this in late March, early April every year since I've been here to have sort of a consistent period of time where students might be less likely to have higher substance rates than their normal year. And so we're trying to just sort of catch that window of time that would represent the rest of the year. So that's what we came up with. Question?
Is there any component of this survey that addresses the social situation of the individual? How many friends they have, their peer groups, their activities? Are they socially isolated? Are they involved in the community? Is there any of that, or are you just looking at specifically, do they take a toke?
No, it's pretty comprehensive. So yeah, we ask about connectedness to adults in the school. We ask about peer connectedness. We ask about depression, anxiety, isolation. We don't ask about like number of friends, but and then it goes into like screen time, number of hours sleeping. Gosh, what am I missing? There's many things we ask about. There's 72 questions. Yeah, and then we can cross-tabulate any of those things. So like if you look at, for example, we'll get into that in a little bit, but if you look at students that report the students that report stress, having experienced stress in the past 12 months. You can isolate just those students and say, like, what are their substance use rates? And like you'll see, oh, their substance use rates are way higher than the kids who report no stress. So yeah, we can cross-tabulate and isolate a bunch of different factors at the same time, but we ask tons of social emotional questions. Yeah. Did I miss
No,
some big ones?
I think that.
Okay, Amy.
And we even asked like how much
I was
time on
raising my
homework.
hand, but I'm not sure
Oh, yeah.
if I answered. Did you say that in 2022 it wasn't asked of the use of substances to cope?
Yeah, it's interesting, like, I know we have
Oh,
the
you know what?
data up there, but it's not on the chart.
Or maybe it mimics, I bet it
might.
mimics the pink one.
Yeah, I think it does, because I know we did ask it.
Yeah, okay,
and
so
I
it's
think it gets-
8%. It blended behind the pink line.
Okay.
Right.
I didn't
Good
know
catch,
if-
Amy.
No, I wasn't trying, there wasn't a catch, I was just trying to see if there was an insight about why we choose to do it some years and not other years, and I missed it, but.
There are a bunch of questions that we alternate, and it's just the sheer number of questions, and trying to respect the students' time where I think we have 120 plus question bank, and so we try to pull, every other year we try to pull a bunch of different ones. But we have a core measure set of questions, 20 to 30 questions that will, no matter what, every year we have data on them. Yeah. Any other questions about this particular slide?
I know I've pointed this out before, but like so that 11th grade is our current 12th grade. And
Oh, good point, yeah.
Yeah, and it showed, as a grade, it shows higher risk, like higher rate of risky behaviors and higher risk of self-medicating with substances to cope with stress. So
Yeah, last year's
it kinda
11th grade
stood out to
cohort
us in looking at
stood
the
out with
data.
lots of risk factors, more so than any other class in last year's 4-year window. And then, so they're all going to be 12th graders this year, so we'll track that cohort to see what their numbers look like. I mean, 12th grade, traditionally, you'll see higher substance use rates and risk factors for almost anything, but
You
in
don't
particular.
usually see the 11th grade
Yeah, the 11th grade is higher than
the
the
12th
12th grade.
grade, which was the case last year.
No
across-
pun intended on
right.
the higher. Okay. All right. It's so hard to avoid the puns. This is student mental health indicators in the past 12 months. So as you can see from 2017, there's been just a steady rise in depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, eating disorders, and self-harm. The Massachusetts Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is what we compare ourselves at the state level, last time they shared data was 2019, and so you can see the comparisons there. We're higher than the state levels. We were lower in 2019, but we're now higher than what that level was, assuming Massachusetts rates have been rising as well, but we don't know because they report so seldomly. What a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these are all risk factors for sure for antisocial behavior and substance use rates and all sorts of negative outcomes. Students, this is broken up by race and ethnicity. So physical, verbal harassment reported. So we asked all the students in LHS, did you experience physical or verbal harassment? And when I isolated just the students who reported being white, only 2% of students reported that. When I looked at just the students who reported being black, 8%, almost 1 out of 10. So you can see, and Latino 6%, Asian 3%. So significantly higher for black and brown kids experiencing physical or verbal harassment at school. LHS school climate indicators, connection. So this is one of the questions about connecting with an adult at school, which has been shown to be a really significant protective factor. And so that rate was, since 2016, been tracked, and it's sort of been fluctuating, but it's around 80% now, which is good to know. But above 80% feeling respected by teachers. Having students they fit in with was asked about in 2020. And I think it's going to be time to ask those questions again this year. LHS students experiencing bullying in the past 12 months. So this was, this kind of plummeted from 16 to 17. Was going down, and then, of course, it's bumping back up from 2021 to 2022. On school properties in red. Online, experiencing bullying online is in blue. White and Latino students report 50% more cyberbullying than black or Asian students for whatever reasons. So there's our local data on
What
bullying.
happened in 2021?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you know what it was?
No, they weren't at
We
school.
weren't at
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
2021?
You know what I love?
Yeah.
4% still reporting on school property.
Yeah.
Why were they here?
We were cohort A,
Oh, you're right,
B, and
yeah.
C,
That's right,
and all of
yeah.
that, so some
Yeah, it
people
wasn't a
were here.
lost year completely, you're right.
But I feel that students who maybe struggle with bullying would choose to stay cohort C, right?
Totally.
And not be here, so.
What to do about these risk factors and what else should we do? So we'll start with what some things that I have experienced in my coalition work and would recommend, and then I would love to ask the folks in attendance tonight, like, what else should we do? But one thing I've brought up in the past, but we haven't really pushed it at the administrative level of the schools, is a program called Check and Connect, which basically pairs an individual staff member at the school with a student that's been identified with administrators and counseling staffs of schools will identify, a handful of students that are sort of struggling or feeling isolated, or that they feel like need someone to check in with them and just support them and be a positive connection. And then teachers will volunteer, or staff, doesn't have to be a teacher, to every single day check and connect with that student for at least a couple minutes. And it's been shown to have really positive outcomes. And so that's one program that I've always looked into for kids feeling more isolated than others. And the cool thing about this is, even if we had really great numbers on this, there's still some kids that don't feel connected and supported in school, right? There's still a small population of students. And so those kids, it might be even more easy to focus on those students with the counseling staff and administrative staff than if a school that has, say, 50% of kids who don't feel connected and supported. So I would love to talk about other things. Restorative practice is another thing that we've had some administrators at the superintendent level get trained in restorative practices, but it hasn't necessarily been rolled out at the school level. So we'd love to see that. And restorative practices, and Shelley, you'll be able to explain this even better than me, but it's basically, instead of, one strike or 3 strikes, you're out, you're suspended, you're expelled, sort of a thing with certain behaviors in school, substance use or antisocial behaviors. There's a group of people brought together of staff and peers to sort of have a circle, like a restorative circle with that person, to check in with them, see what's missing, what's not happening, how do you feel about your place in the school, and sort of finding where the gaps are with the student, and then trying to find a way to support that student to make healthier choices and healthier behaviors. At the same time, sharing the story of what their impact is on them. Am I missing
Yeah, it puts the relationships more at the center, rather than looking at it from a criminal justice perspective of, like, there's an infraction and there's a penalty. It's more about your relationship with the community is affected by what you've done, and then having a place for whoever has been impacted to also feed that back up and say, like, this is how I was harmed. And then there's a conversation about what needs to happen to make it right. So it's more of a process, and it focuses less on discipline and more on, restoring somebody to community and improving the community and repairing the community. But it goes beyond that, in that true restorative practices also have, like, community building all the way through, so that you build affective community into the school experience. So there are places where circles, we're in a circle right now, but, like, where circles happen and everybody has a chance to, like, hear from other people in their circle, in their community, on a variety of topics. So it's kind of more like weaving that into the culture of the school, so that everybody, really feels a part of it, and that they're heard and, noticed. So. And that's the training that, I was at the training with some administrators a couple of years ago, and it was more at that level than on the conferences, because I think you have to kind of build in that level of community response to things through circles before you even take it to the next level, so.
And the timing, of course, was horrible with that, because then
Yeah, and then
pandemic.
none of us could be in the building
Yeah.
together, so.
It's hard to
it
do a
was
circle
bad,
when
It was
you're-
bad timing.
Yeah.
We couldn't have the desks in circles. We had to be in rows, literally, so
Yeah.
it was really tough.
Where was your training?
It was the IIRP, the International Institute for Restorative Practices. And then we had registered, and it was on Zoom, so the pandemic had started. I think we had already put in place to do it, and then we ended up having to do the training on Zoom in that summer in between, where we were coming back in cohorts, so.
I did it via Zoom as well. I did it
Did you?
through Suffolk University.
Mhm.
And I'm using that practice in my work, and to try, especially because the population we're working with are civilly committed. So they're not criminally committed, so the ability to put discipline practices in place is limited. And so we use that circle building as a way to get folks to buy into supporting each other and coming together as a community.
And it should be said, Barbara works with the Sheriff's Department.
Right.
Doing some incredible work, and works with our Wellness Department, bringing people who have tons of lived experience into the school community to share their experience with 12th grade classes. Yeah, so.
But I love the restorative practices personally, it's something we're working, but it does take an entire mindset shift, and really there has to be buy-in.
Right.
But I think, and I may have told you this, Shelley, I think that Holyoke Public Schools has a pretty big restorative justice, and I think you could even Google information, right?
Yeah, Candace, you got to report back.
I will. I don't know about it yet, but
I think
they started a
you
couple
did
years
mention
ago.
that to me last week.
Yes.
Yeah.
They offered they're young, they have youth leaders that were helping facilitate a training recently, I think for youth development workers, not necessarily just school staff. I think it was just before the pandemic, but it was so intriguing. So they're definitely in the middle of doing it. They're not new to it, which is really cool.
Well, I kind of like it because it isn't saying I'm sorry, it's doing sorry.
Yeah, I like that.
It's powerful. It's powerful if you have the buy-in. And I know this year we have Connect blocks starting tomorrow for the first time. So it's once a month there will be a block where students are in a smaller group, and there's supposed to be an opportunity to deal with issues that you want the whole school to pay attention to. And that hasn't been totally developed yet what it'll look like, but I think there's some opportunity there for some restorative practices as far as the circle building part. So.
Do the teachers who are running those classes know what they're supposed to do?
Such a
So
good question.
it's a really good question. So,
Or are we just going to have a class and be like, okay, everyone's...
no, it's supposed. Okay, I don't know if I want to get into this completely right now.
No,
but
that's okay.
Tomorrow's is the first one, and it's actually on school safety, and it's being facilitated by the principal over the intercom for everybody. So he's doing the first one as a way of it's something we have to address for the whole school.
Okay.
So, but it's good to address it while students are in a small group, so they have the opportunity to express feelings about the topic, because it is obviously a serious and emotional topic. So, so our first one is tomorrow, and we get kind of the assist of having the principal lead it, and then after that, there's a committee forming of staff who are going to be developing what will happen in those Connect blocks. So it's a work in progress.
So there might be opportunities in there to do more pro-social supportive stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That's
cool.
the hope.
That's really cool.
That's the hope.
Well, I'd love to open the floor. I've done way too much talking already, but just looking at the most recent risk factors that I've shared, I'd love to hear people's ideas of it. What about this? Have you thought about this? Have you tried that? Because this is a great time to sort of brainstorm what to do about it without necessarily the evidence-based public health response, because sometimes that misses the point in a local community. Thinking about the stress and the bullying, and yeah.
I think it's more of a question because I don't remember everything. When Paul talked about the kind of mentoring program with a school staff person and, kind of checking in with someone who might be struggling or in certain risk categories, do we have, Shelley, I'm sorry, you probably are going to say Amy, I run this, but do we have peer mentors?
We have peer leaders.
Amy,
but
I
that's
run.
different.
She runs it. Yeah.
Yeah, she does run that.
I do run peer leadership, but it's not really mentors. It's different. So we don't have that exactly.
Is it
no.
for specific? So I'm thinking about when I was in high school, we had, there was kind of more informal. There were a few of us who kind of had gone through some things, and so the school would say, hey, we know someone who's struggling. Could you kind of take them in? So it was not a formal program, but I remember that being an opportunity for some of us to maybe take care of ourselves a little bit better and also to be a healthy peer for someone who is struggling. And I just didn't remember if our school.
We don't have that component of it, but that's a great suggestion.
And you would get
And
those tips from staff?
It was, sorry, I guess I can share my personal experience, but it was more like, hey, we know that you go to Alateen. Would you give so-and-so would you take them under your wing and bring them to Alateen with you? And, or could you take some time during the day to make sure you connect with them because they're having a hard time? So it was more around, like, we know there's alcoholism in your family and you're doing something about it, and this child, this student you're a senior, they're a freshman, could you provide a little
Yeah,
support?
we don't have any formal process for that. I would say sometimes we have informal, like informal connections that might be made, but there's no training that we would provide or right now. But I think that's a great idea if we did want to formalize it more. Because like peer leaders are more facilitating specific curriculum in the health classes mostly, both like the 8th grade and the 9th grade health classes, more so than being assigned like a mentee to kind of check in with. But having said that, I have had guidance call us sometimes and say, oh, we have a student who's new to the district. Is there a peer leader who they could buddy up with until they kind of get their feet under them?
Yeah.
But not on like personal life challenges. That's we haven't gone to that level.
I know a lot of employers, because I work in the employee well-being space with adults, and I know a lot of employers now are doing peer mental health networks. And so the peers, some people are kind of volunteering to be the peer who is there to connect with other peers. So they do receive training, like for us, it's from our EAP. And so like a licensed clinician would kind of lead a training to get these kind of wellness champions ready and there for support.
It could be like kindergarten buddies.
Kindergarten buddies, that's what it is. That's what it is. The 5th grade buddy. That's exactly what it
So
is.
you see kindergartners coming up to the high school and connecting.
You're touching on where I'm coming from. My eldest is only in middle school, and you've done a tremendous job at indoctrinating language that made them think I was a criminal for using medical marijuana. They came from the schools with an understanding that marijuana was equal to heroin, that marijuana was equal to drinking and driving. So you're doing a tremendous job at educating them and scaring them away. Congratulations, and believe me, I toned it down with them. And there's research on this. Most serial killers are 16 to 20. Okay, so you have somebody who's had 3 or 4 years by the time they're in high school to sit down. I understand your funding. You guys are great. You have tons more funding. Well, you have funding, grand-jury funding, but you're placed in the high school. You're placed in the high school.
No, it's district-wide. We're both
District-wide. So you're the close communicator to all the different recipients of the HUD money.
CDC.
CDC money, thank you. Is there any direct action in the middle school level? I mean, I'm not laughing at the idea of kindergarten cops, but I am suggesting that you're starting too late. I am. Flat out. If you want to catch somebody who's going to be an issue to a community, you're starting too late. You look at the stats, half the serial killers in high schools are age 16 to 20.
Yeah, we work with the wellness classes at both
I'm just
middle
asking if
schools.
your funding and programming reaches down there beyond the email that I got about this meeting and another meeting.
Yeah, we do
I'll speak to that.
wellness. We work with the wellness program at the middle schools to do an evidence-based curricula out of the Botfin Life Skills program. So they do everything from talking about particular substances and the impacts of using those substances, but also on pro-social skill development like peer-to-peer support, resiliency building, stress management, stuff like that. So that's middle school all the way through 9th grade. And we even do Botfin Life Skills starting as early as 3rd and 4th grade. So that's way upstream prevention stuff that happens in the elementary levels in Longmeadow. And that has nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. It has everything to do with social skills. So stress management, coping skills, peer-to-peer support skills, and self-soothing, things like that. So yeah, our funding reaches pretty far back as far as the ages. Like we go pretty young. And then it's not till middle school where substances start to get really focused on and isolated.
So where does an IEP stop and you start?
We have nothing to do with the IEP process. Like we're this
So this is a different set of
complete.
students that need social advances.
No, there's probably tons
this
of overlap.
Is, no, this is universal. Like the life skills program he's talking about is universally taught to all elementary students in those grades, and it's to build skills so that they will be less vulnerable to all sorts of things, violence being one of them, but also like substance use disorders, mental health issues. So it's trying to like front load because prevention is more effective. You're right. Like, I mean, if we go earlier, that is the way to go. So as far as our coalition goes, it has been through funding health curriculum, which everybody has access to. It's not targeted. It's not a targeted intervention. We're not involved in targeted interventions because we're not technically a part of the school district. So whatever we offer and fund is a universal approach in the whole community. So an IEP is like a completely different entity from the school district. So we're not.
We don't do direct service with individual
we don't do direct
students.
service at all.
We do like
So-
environmental strategies to sort of change the whole
Yeah.
environment of the community, which is it's a little different than I think.
Well, you talked about so much effort putting into identifying people. I thought that, and you talked about mentorship
Oh, but
here.
all of these are
particularly.
anonymous surveys, so we have no way of knowing like what student would have
This is
said
all
what on a
aggregated, so we don't-
survey.
yeah, we can't-
We have no way
So
of
this is really just,
It's to get
Big
this
picture.
is what we sense the community is answering on an anonymous survey, and we're going to try and program from that. It's a start.
It gives us information about where our weak spots are to target.
And our strengths, which
And our
we have
strengths, yeah.
many in Long Meadow, which we're not talking about a lot today.
And sorry, I'm just adding that the survey, like you said, that's one piece of information you draw on, but
Right.
the coalition is made up of adults and students so adults from different sectors, so that they're different perspectives.
12 different sectors.
And then students, so like, it's kind of like I would say like like we're collecting information and also putting the feelers out to get insights from the community. And I just, as a parent, want to speak up and say that there's all of the environmental programming that you do as a whole, like you go in and educate from, younger levels. But also as a parent, I know, I mean, my kids were young middle schoolers when I benefited from the things that I learned through the coalition and the substance use work from the schools that changed how I conversed with my kids. So I, as a member of the community, benefited by, learning some things that changed how I could talk and kind of redirect my own kids. I feel like it's kind of like it's multi-pronged.
Yeah, parent education is a big piece of our work for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Any other ideas on risk factors before we go into? We'll talk a little bit about alcohol specifically, cannabis specifically, and vaping specifically next, and then I'll get feedback about each of those things as well. Yeah, Rhea.
I think that the check and connect idea is really great, and using those connect blocks because they're built in. And I know some of the teachers that I was talking with today about it mentioned that they aren't really sure about the whole ideas within the connect blocks, but they know that the concept of it was brought up because through the surveys it was realized that there's not enough kids who are getting those connections with teachers, or they want to provide more connections between the teachers and the students. So I think that incorporating the check and connect between the through the connect blocks would be really helpful for those specified issues based on our weak spots, because it would give not just those who are having the obvious struggles that could be picked out and given a peer mentor or something like that, but overall it would provide a lot of support for anyone with varying degrees of issue spots.
Yeah, needs. And I love it, Rhea. And I love the idea of, so Check and Connect is really staff driven, but what's being shared today is the idea of could there also be a peer component, which I think is so interesting. So you have a huge active Key Club in Long Meadow, right? And they're always looking for these great volunteer projects, and I'm like, can you give the Key Club students can you give them mental health first aid training to just how to look for signs and symptoms of their peers?
That's great.
And so if they see someone sitting at lunch and they just look really distraught, because there's such great kids that are involved in Key Club and they want to be active, they want to be involved, and there's nothing, I've never quite heard of something like that, but that essentially is similar to Check and Connect, which I love that idea. It's a little more of a creative way to do that, which I think is cool. And peer-to-peer is monumentally influential. It's not just a caring adult. A caring adult is very influential, but peer is very powerful as well.
I like that idea.
Yeah. One thing we'd have to do is so you had a counseling meeting today, and I'm wondering, I'll talk with Jean Fontaine and Sue Bertrand about this, about how feasible is it to get it sounds kind of awful, but it's like get a list of students who would benefit from connecting. Is that something that would ever be done?
It couldn't be shared, like, I think for confidentiality's sake, it could not be shared with. The way I would see it going is like a counselor would ask the student, this is a service we're providing, and then if they gave permission and they were interested, then we could say, all right, here's a student who's willing to be contacted by a peer mentor. So I don't think we would ever like give a list, out. But if we had a list of students, like I'm thinking about Key Club, and are either of you involved in Key Club? So do you think Key Clubbers would be interested in, like, if we offered a training, and if they knew that if they did the training and then made themselves available, that would count as volunteer hours?
That's the real driver,
It's
right?
all about the volunteer.
Yeah, like if they could count, or NHS students could count,
NHS
because it's
students,
serving,
that would
you're
be
serving your school,
Absolutely.
right?
National Honor
That's the point.
Society, yeah.
So if we did provide that, and the coalition could fund the training, right?
Oh,
Like,
those
we
are
could
free.
just- Oh, okay,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
can bring that in.
Mental health first aid they're trying to get as many people trained as possible.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
What do you think, as students?
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear.
I definitely think that's a good idea. And even in peer leadership or health classes, I think that it would allow a wider like scope of people, because I know that like there's a cutoff for NHS based on GPA, and also some people can't do Key Clubs for like a wide variety of reasons, like I don't know, work, school, sports, stuff like that. So if it's like targeted towards like a broader group of people, then
So
if more
open it
people,
up, even.
yeah,
Like we could recruit from Key Club and NHS, but don't limit it
yeah.
to. Key
Oh,
Club and
interesting.
NHS.
And I would also say that it probably, even if it was opened up to Key Club, that it wasn't mandatory for all Key Club members, because some
Right.
people might feel inclined to do this type of support, and some people might say that's
That's my worst nightmare.
like, I don't,
And we
yeah.
don't want that, yeah.
And it's probably not effective if you're not inclined to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I
Yeah,
think,
correct.
Paul, you mentioned that before when you were saying this, can we get a list of the people that could benefit from connecting? I'm going to offer that everyone benefits from connecting.
Good point, Chris Rich. You should be a life coach. She's available, folks. Hardly available, very hard to get a
That was the thing that I was going to mention. Just watch that graph showing the drastic climb in mental health. I'm going to say this again, I've said it before. That is something that we really need to focus on, and just helping kids have tools to cope with anxiety and stress and all that. That was scary to see that.
Yeah, and I mean,
Grow.
usually those are all precursors to higher. In my field, it's like, what are the substance use rates? What are the 30-day substance use rates? And they're not horribly bad right now, the substance use rates, but man, all the risk factors are. And so you're like, we're going to see some stuff change in the next few years, which isn't going to be good. But yeah, what can we do to prevent? It's almost like what you're talking about, Rhea, it reminds me of like active bystander, but instead of active bystander, it's like active connector. It's like not waiting for an incident to happen, but just sort of looking around you and just being aware of the kids around you and who could use someone to just say hi, you know?
And to the same point, maybe even normalizing some of that anxiety and stress, so that kids aren't sitting in a place where, I feel this way, no one else feels this way.
So isolated,
There's something
yeah.
wrong with me, and I need to take action to try to manage it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we ask
So-
about isolation, and the isolation rates are higher this year than last year.
Yeah,
I
has
feel-
the school done anything around It's Okay Not to Be Okay? That campaign?
Yeah, well, we did, in the middle of the pandemic, we did the Minding Your Mind, which
Okay.
really addressed it's okay not to be okay. But that was over a year ago, so it's time to revisit another thing, right? Or the same thing. But it was a great message. It really stuck with me and the students. So that was when we had Minding Your Mind come in out of Boston, and they did Zoom calls where they had like 18 to 25-year-old peer speakers talk about their experience with stress and anxiety, and they shared their story on a Zoom call with 3 or 4 groups or classes of students. And so we must have had, I don't know, we had many sessions, broken up to address the whole student body. It took a while, middle school and high school. But yeah, I think it's time to remind the district of it's okay to not be okay. I don't know what's being done to address those particular stress and depression issues, so, and isolation issues. So I'm going to check in with Sue about that. I mean, you would know better than me.
I know there's some consideration of universal mental health screenings.
Yeah, that's what
for the
is
first
going
time,
on.
because we had the state mandated screenings for substance use in grades 7 and 9, which we do now. That took a break during the pandemic too, but that's back. But there's also talk about doing universal mental health, because the survey, we don't know who the individuals are, so we can't follow up. But if we could do a screening that would allow for follow-up, that would be great. So, but it's in the formative stages, if that answers your question. There's some forms of screening informally during the health classes. Like I certainly know, like Megan Roy gives opportunities for her students to reach out for help on those topics, and a lot of students do, through her, and then she connects them to the right person in the building. But formalizing it universally would be obviously the best way to go.
I think that's going to
being
happen. That
explored.
seems like the mental
I know,
health.
it's-
Universal mental health screening seems like it's going to happen. I
don't
hope
know
it's going to
when.
be in the spring or this year, but if it's not, it's
Mhm.
going to be very soon. Because that's really useful information. And then it gives a chance to actually connect with.
Mhm.
It's not just a screening, right? It's like an actual opportunity
You
to
can then have
build a
follow-up
little
and referral
relationship.
for services, and like you can meet a social worker in the building and things like that.
All right. I'm going to move on. We have a bunch
Yeah.
more stuff to do with 20 minutes, but I'm gonna try to fly a little bit. Here's our electronic nicotine delivery system data, which are commonly known as vapes. Our 30-day past use is in green since 2018. So it was dropping really precipitously, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and then a bump up from last year. Daily use is also up from the year before. Something to just keep an eye on is that it's starting to rebound, which is not great, but also to be expected. It was like the lowest ever in the middle of the pandemic because people just didn't have social access to drugs and alcohol for the most part. So how should we prevent teen vaping?
People
These are-
being young people,
What
obviously
did I say?
adults had a lot of access.
Oh yeah.
But
Young people didn't have a lot of.
young people.
Well, adults were pretty isolated too. They weren't, partying or socializing with.
Right.
How should we prevent teen vaping? So this is our next question. The Catch My Breath curriculum. I was just trained as a trainer over the summer, and so I am going to work with the wellness teachers at the middle and high school levels to Catch My Breath is evidence-based vaping prevention specifically, and so that's going to be in addition to their BOTVIN life skills classes. So I'm going to work with them, I think, in the next professional development day. Something else we can do compliance checks, which is just making sure all the tobacco licensees in town are carding and appropriately checking for ID to make sure people are old enough to purchase. There's not very many tobacco licensees in town. Shoulder tap surveys, we did one in Enfield at one of the vape shops, Voltage Vape, and 79% of strangers that were approached by a young-looking buyer said, "No, I will not buy you a vaping device." And so that's nearly 8 out of 10, which is not. I would love to see that in the 90s, but 80% is still a vast majority, which is great. They approached more than 60 adults in one afternoon. They did a great job. So we worked with the Enfield Police Department to do that, and they have young explorers, they're interested in law enforcement and juvenile, or in criminal justice, and they're anywhere from 16 to 18. They're students that they work with. So that was in Enfield over the summer in the middle of August. The targeted youth-created PSAs. So we flirted with this. We did like general prevention or general, pro-social behavior PSAs, like "This is my natural high," that sort of PSA a couple years ago. But we haven't done like targeted PSAs on vaping, which vaping is the thing that's gonna bounce up higher than a lot of the other substances because it was so high before the pandemic. I imagine, and so it'd be great to work with young people to create PSAs. And I haven't said this yet, but thank you so much to LCTV for hosting this meeting, and Brian Kazaska, the program director, for coordinating this. They have been so accessible to coordinate things like youth PSAs, so we would love to do that. And I'm going to get feedback from the crowd in just a sec because I want to see what you guys think. Vigilance at or near bathrooms and locker rooms at school. That these are high use spaces that we keep hearing about the middle and high school. Middle school, not nearly as much, but high school, much more prevalent. Catch My Breath curriculum, I already talked about that. Working with the Board of Health. Shelley and I were meeting with the health director last week to talk about sort of emerging or new industry practices around nicotine-based products. So I don't know if it's Zine or Zyn or whatever it is, but there's synthetic nicotine products on the market right now that are totally trying to find loopholes in local policy and state policy and federal policy. And so we're trying to figure out, well, how do we prevent young people from getting their hands on something that we know is addictive and not healthy? It'll wire their brain for addiction. Nicotine's more addictive than cocaine. So let's get them away from nicotine. So synthetic nicotine also as addictive as regular nicotine. So anyways, we're working with the Board of Health just to figure out how can we sort of stay ahead of those things. Because for right now, you can get on, I believe, which are these little synthetic nicotine pouches that you use like chewing tobacco, but you don't spit it out, you swallow it. And that is available at the Big Y Express. And Big Y Express, for whatever reason, has like sold products that aren't necessarily legal in Massachusetts. I don't know why they're on the cutting edge of that, but they did that with like CBD infused foods they were selling for a while, which was completely illegal and never allowed in Massachusetts. And they were doing it for like months. And so we just have to stay on the Board of Health to like work with them to say, what are they selling at Big Y Express now? Because they're, I don't know what their practice
Was
is.
it labeled?
Yeah, it's like.
Oh, so you weren't like surprised?
No, it's all.
you don't
They had like a whole display of
a whole
CBD
display.
infused products, which there could be great benefit to that, but there was they weren't regulated by the FDA, but they were being sold as a food product, which is illegal. So they removed them from the shelves, and hopefully when they get their act together, the CBD industry, not Big Y Express, but then they'll come back on the shelves, I imagine. But yeah, it's weird to see that stuff happen, but it's stuff that we should keep an eye out for. But I wanted to ask you all, this is an ad we put in the Courier Journal, just thanking Voltage Vape for hosting the shoulder tap survey. Because most Enfield residents did the right thing and they did not buy. 68 people were approached, so it was a great.
I love that kind of promotion.
What's that?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's basically promotion saying, don't buy,
Thanks for doing the right
vapes.
thing.
Thanks for doing the right thing, but I think it makes people feel good, and it maybe other people seeing it will, have a physiological response that makes them less inclined to do something that they shouldn't.
Yeah, we do stuff like this because it's technically called a social norms campaign or social norms marketing, where you take a positive social healthy behavior, you advertise it like wild, and people will see it and connect with it and say, hey, I identify with that. I'm part of the healthy norm. I also would not buy. Oh, that's so great. And so you don't have parents and adults feeling as isolated, being like, well, I mean, I did it when I was a kid, so I'll do it for someone if they approach me, because that's not what most people do. They do the right thing.
And if you're in the 21%, you might look at that and say, oh, the next time a kid approaches me, it may be part of this, and I may be. It may not just be a kid
Secret
looking
shopper.
for it.
Yeah.
Right.
You're on candid
You gotta
camera.
watch out for that.
Yeah, what happened when they did say yes?
They're given a little card. I could have shown you what it says, but it just basically says, you were caught. Please do the right. We were doing a community survey. Please do the right thing next time. These are the potential penalties if law enforcement were to get involved. So there's
I like
there's
it.
an unmarked car watching with Enfield police, and they don't intervene.
Not to punish the
They don't
people.
intervene unless there's like
To
a safety
educate them,
issue.
to educate them.
Yeah.
Just if there's a
Yeah.
safety issue.
They don't even
they're not
step out of
called
their
in at
car,
all.
so no one even knows they're there unless
Yeah.
there's a safety thing, which we've
Right.
never had a safety thing. But
Right.
and the kids are so great. They're usually just like, oh, I'm so sorry, we're actually just doing a survey, and they hand them this card that says,
Okay.
do the right thing. And if people pass, they get a card saying, you did the right thing.
Okay.
So everyone wins.
They get a gold
Advocate
star.
for a second.
Yeah.
With the free vape.
Is it weird that I feel like this is a free advertisement for Voltage Vape?
It is. Well, they're doing the right thing. So they card young-looking buyers, or
Are they?
they're a really good
My
business.
question.
So we worked with Enfield and their health department to say, like, of all the vape shops, like, who's doing the right thing? Like, who's doing it the right way? And they're like, Voltage Vape has been they've been really great to work with. They're not. We do compliance checks with them, and they like very consistently pass. So like, yeah, we're sort of like celebrating them for doing the right thing. We don't want to kill a business, but we would like to celebrate the ones doing the right thing.
Interesting.
Anything else, Devil?
Devil.
I think I have
Because
my
we
own
don't,
opinion
I
on
mean,
Yeah.
I feel like I need to say here, like, we don't focus on policy for people above the age of 21. So, like, that's not our wheelhouse. So we do tend to focus on, like, our goal is to try to keep stuff out of the hands of people illegally under 21, because the risk to the brain is so much greater. So we don't tend to try to shut down a vape shop that if they were just selling to people above the age of 21 who can make an informed decision about their their health care, then that's not, so yeah, it might look like we're celebrating a vape shop, but we're celebrating them for keeping it away from people under 21. And that's the way to be responsible in the industry, so.
I like their addresses there.
Yeah, it's like they can look it up on Google. They,
Like, we didn't put their logo in, did we?
no.
And a list of their products.
And honestly,
Discount.
if other vape shops see this, I would love for them to be like, oh, okay, cool. And like, I want them to be, wanting to be recognized for doing the right thing. Because we're not anti-business, we are very much pro-youth health. Next slide. Students reported 30-day use of a bunch of different substances: alcohol, binge drinking, and binge drinking is 3 or more drinks for a male, female, 4 more drinks for a female in a sitting, cannabis, and vaping nicotine. As you can see, from 2019 to 2022, pretty good drops in everything except for last year. So there was a bump up in alcohol, bump up in binge drinking, bump up in cannabis use, almost double the use of cannabis from the year before last, and then a bump up in vaping nicotine. So everything was going down, and then everything bumped back up last year. So we're already starting to see the consequences of all the risk factors we were talking
I was happy that the vaping stayed pretty flat.
about. Kind of flat. Yeah.
Only 1 percentage point. Like,
Yeah.
we're
What's still 1 out of 10
compared to like
kids,
the
though?
29% where it was a few years ago.
Yeah, that was 1 out of 3 kids. Not great.
I know. I like to think that it has peaked and that the industry, like, that more young people are on to the industry. And,
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm being optimistic.
I mean, that Juul settlement
But-
certainly helps.
We love
So
your optimism.
we need to be optimistic,
Yeah.
Sheila.
Yeah.
I think the little packs you're talking about are the next.
That's the next thing. I mean, they have the nicotine-based
Yeah.
industry has to find
Yeah,
something,
right.
and they don't have a future with adult users. So like, they don't want to initiate adult users, because adult users are way easier, have an easier time of quitting. So they have to get young users, because that's the lifetime user. Because the earlier they use, the harder it is for them to quit later in life. So it's an evil setup. Addiction's a weird industry to get involved in, but once they're committed to it, they have to follow suit. It's pretty disappointing. But you're right, the pouches might be the next big thing, so we'll have to keep an eye out. And alcohol use prevention, some of the things we've been doing. So there's plainclothes officers at high-profile sporting events, just keeping an eye on just like the health and safety of the student body. And the students recognize them for the most part, and they know that they're there, which I'm fine with because it still influences their behaviors. The Parents Who Host Lose the Most campaign, that's a lawn sign campaign. We traditionally do a month out from like the spring prom and graduation party season, but we've had people say, let's do that sort of all year. Let's do it a couple times a year, so it's not just once a year. And so parents are reminded, oh, I shouldn't host drinking parties during the holidays either for my minors. Targeted compliance checks we had during the key stakeholder interviews and focus groups over this past summer. We had one particular store that came up a few times that has been selling to minors that's in Enfield, and so we're working with Enfield's liquor licensing board to target that place for compliance checks over a few months. So that's really great information that we got, and we're following up. Sports captains meetings, I meet with all the sports captains of each season to do a chemical influence on performance presentation, and I sort of like challenge the team captains to have their teams commit to seasons above the influence, because they'll perform so much better if they're not drinking and smoking weed and doing other drugs.
Are you scheduled already to go in?
Mike has me coming in on like their second meeting, yeah.
Okay.
And I always bring donuts because they're very healthy. Cape Week norms, this is probably a whole nother meeting, but this has come up every year, and for some reason we've just been like, oh, it's not really in our jurisdiction. But now it's just become much more of an issue of, well, the parents that are in our jurisdiction are renting these houses out for their 12th graders that are graduating, and some really unsafe things are happening out there, so it's probably time to start addressing this as a coalition. Increasing teen programming at the JCC. So there's a new youth and family programs director at the JCC, and she's a former principal at Blueberry Hill. And so she's an incredible partner of the community in the past, and she wants to keep working together to increase teen programming at JCC, which has been sort of dormant the last few years, which would be great because there's very few pro-social opportunities for teenagers in Longmeadow who are not involved in club sports or other clubs. Yeah, so that's what I've come up with, and I would love to just get people's feedback. We only have 5 more minutes officially in the meeting, but I'd love to get other people's feedback before we move on. So alcohol use prevention in particular.
So we write lists of things to do.
Yeah, none of this stuff is on, or one of these things is on our action plan. So we want to inform our action plan with new strategies. That's kind of what I'm doing.
Well, actually, hosting that club, the thing, the first football game, how there was that club, I don't even know what it was called.
Lancer Way.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was probably a really, really smart thing to do, and I know it was
Yeah.
for the clubs.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that a lot of kids like drink before the football games at like
Mhm.
somebody's house.
Mhm.
And so if they were at that club thing, then they didn't have access to somebody's house.
Pre-gaming.
Yeah, they weren't pre-gaming. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
doing something like that.
Yeah, like sponsoring a tailgate, a structured tailgate where there's some
Mhm.
games or activities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's actually a national sad thing, is having clubs sponsor tailgates.
Oh, yeah.
So that's an
Oh,
idea.
Students against drunk driving.
Yeah,
Like,
students.
it doesn't
Yeah.
sound like a sad thing.
No, I know. I'm looking at them.
Such a horrible actor.
Rita and Grace are also in STAND, which is our SAD chapter. So,
Okay.
but SAD is the national organization, and they have a tailgate program that you can like sponsor to have, like a kind of sober activity before a game.
Right.
Um,
Like just by chance, we
so-
happen to have hosted a team dinner that night, not realize it, like it's
Mhm.
just the way it. And then I was like, this is actually working out pretty well, because then all the kids were at our house, so we knew that they didn't have access to anything, and then they went to the football game.
Mm.
And so I
That's
actually
great.
think it worked out really well.
Yeah.
So I think if there are more things like that, because they're just looking for stuff to do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They just want to be together. It's like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what they
Yeah.
do.
Right, yeah.
Or maybe they're just looking to not be left out, so
Yes.
they're doing whatever it is that
Yeah.
Yeah.
is
It's
happening.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the Safe Home a new initiative, or is that?
No, that's, Shelley's
It's an
been
old initiative.
It's an
coordinating
old
that.
Actually,
initiative.
yeah,
Okay.
and yes. Is that up on here?
Well, I'm
Or is it-
new
No, no,
to the
but-
committee.
Yeah, yeah,
so-
no, no.
No.
Safe Homes has a long history of its own, which predates the coalition. But honestly, since the coalition started, Safe Homes has fizzled, and a lot of the parent energy has come into the coalition, like many of you here. So I think we're at a point where we may just let Safe Homes roll into the coalition. But that remains to be seen. In about a month, that decision will be made. So,
I mean,
depending on what parents say.
Parents who host the most, whatever that acronym is, that's is aligned with this
Completely.
philosophy of Safe Homes,
Yes,
right?
completely, yeah. It is. And
I would
Safe-
love to formalize a directory for parents who sign up for it. It's like, how great would it be if the norm is every fall that parents who want to do the right thing all sign up to be a safe home, and then there's a directory. It could just be digital, right? Where like, if Candace is like, who's Amy Higgins? Will they be hosting a drinking party that my kid's going to? I want to check her out and see if she's on the Safe Homes Network. This is the whole goal of it, right?
That
And
was
then-
the idea.
Yeah, and then,
right?
Yeah.
but every district I've worked in has really struggled coming up with this directory because it's such a labor,
Mhm.
to get parents to sign up. And then you want to have like a good
You need a
good group of-
substantial group,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
it feels like
Some
that's what
momentum,
most
yeah.
people are doing. Yeah.
So that's sort of my dream. So I'd still love to figure out like what are the steps to get that done
Yeah.
in the fall.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have a directory, but it's distributed just to people in the directory,
Mhm.
almost out of privacy. So people in the directory can look and see who else do I know is like-minded on the issue. Because if you sign that you want to be in the directory, one of the things says, and I welcome communication from other parents. So then you know, like, if somebody has listed themselves there. But I feel like the whole system was created probably 25 years ago, and it was back in the day of the yellow pages, like when you use directories like that, and I don't think we do anymore. So the idea, I think, is good, but I think the format is dated, and that's not the way communication happens so differently now. So I think the concept is good, and like the social norming of it is good, but if we do it as a part of the coalition and not a separate entity, maybe we could look at that.
Yeah,
and
like
see.
how can we make it current?
Yeah,
Because there is
exactly.
phone trees that exist that it's so much easier to have a group of people.
I don't know if
texting.
anybody has ever used our directory to call somebody. But anyway, Rhea.
Maybe in an effort to get more parents to sign up at like the middle school and high school back to school nights for the parents, or even for like the fall parent teacher conferences, we could have like a booth, an informational booth set up there, because I know that like in person it'd get like much more engagement. than if it was just sent in like an email or something like that. Or even at like football games, because if one parent goes up and signs up, another might be like, oh, what is that? So then it'll, like, a group of parents might go in there.
Yeah, I like the idea of the sporting events. We haven't tried that before. We have
Yeah.
tried all of the parent nights. We have. So,
Well, there's a
and it's
network
hard.
that works with these kids who are looking to drink, right? They find out where is that party happening, at whose house, who allows it. So, perhaps tapping into whatever mechanism they're using to find that, to find the safer alternative, I'm not sure. That was just,
Right.
when you raised your hand, Rhea, that was the first thing I thought about is, the kids are going to know.
Where
They
can
have
drink
the
and where they
directory
drink.
of the
Right,
house.
they have.
Exactly, they
have
do.
the directory.
And on the other hand, like, we want the kids to also know that's not a house where we can go do, like,
Right.
I don't know, we used to be able to just say, is so-and-so's parents gonna be home? Because I'm gonna call and just, hi, Gabriel's
Right.
coming over, or
Yeah.
whatever,
Right.
are you gonna be home? And now a parent being home
Doesn't
really
Right.
mean
doesn't
it's a
necessarily
safe home.
mean
Yeah.
something.
But the kids having a network where they kind of know, this is, you can come hang out here, but this is not a place where you're gonna be served alcohol. Or we could have a giant, like, it's back to school night, we could just have a giant sticky wall. You take your name on a sticky note, put it up there, and just watch how the stickies grow.
Grow the stickies.
Yeah. All
Can you help
parent
us grow the
names.
stickies? I'm going to make a note of the growing sticky wall.
I like that idea.
And I
No, but
think I'll know what it
just,
But
means.
something very visual.
I'm kidding, but something visual.
Yeah.
No,
Like
that's
when
not
we do
it.
our,
Yeah.
when we do our meetings and we use the digital stickies,
Yeah.
and you see people's
It's
ideas
fun.
go up, it's like,
Well, the thing we've tried to tap into, so like, let's say there's an LHS back to school night. At some point, everyone's in the auditorium, right?
Not for
No,
back to school.
No.
not a
No.
back to
Is there
school
something
night.
like that?
At the athletics night.
So the athletics night is a big one. Like a lot of people have to show up for it, and so
How's that?
that's when like there should just be a big fat QR code, right? And there's what we need is just 2 minutes
Right.
of everyone looking at that QR code with their phone, and everyone's
Right.
quiet. And if you want to sign up, sign up.
so
Do you know what I mean? Like
Right?
that would
Well,
be
that
great.
makes it
It's basically a
more
big sticky
easier.
board.
Right.
But it's like so hard to get that 2 minutes at the sports
Yeah.
meeting. Like how hard have we
I mean,
fought?
I do speak for 5, they give me about
Yeah.
5 minutes,
You
but
get
I've
5?
never brought like a QR code. and
Big
put it up
fat
there.
QR. I'm talking.
Instead, but it's not a lot of parents, it's also not a lot of parents like it used to be like that.
Oh,
You were there,
that's-
right? Didn't you find like it wasn't that many parents?
I skipped the meeting part and just went to the
See?
team part.
I know, so I saw you only after.
Yeah, it's really
No
awkward.
QR code for you.
So
This
actually,
is on LCT.
that's what you.
You just had tens of people learn the truth.
But she's
So
only
you
been going for
actually-
6
if
years.
you
She
have-
skipped this one.
Exactly. If you have the QR code at the team parts,
Yeah.
that would be
Oh, so
good.
me getting the coaches to do something I want them to do.
Yeah, good
The
luck with
coaches who
that.
they maybe just hired like a minute ago.
What about the captains?
The captain's actually the way to
Or
go.
what about
no, but
the
they're not going to
boost-
get their parents to
It's
sign
the
up.
What
parents,
about
it's
the
the booster
booster
clubs.
club
Yeah.
Booster
leaders?
clubs,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a million, yes, but what we need is the QR code, and then we just need to like.
I
boom.
like-
When the parents
I
are
like that
sending up the
idea.
list for SNAP raise, you put a little plug in,
What's that?
It's like the donation.
fundraisers.
Oh, the fundraisers.
Big donor, Amy?
Yes, let me write a check. Do not ask me to give away 20 emails of my friends and family members.
Here, 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 here. I appreciate that.
I will
Cool.
write you a check.
I want to acknowledge that it's past 8 o'clock, and if you have to leave, we totally get it, and we support that. I always leave until 8:30 to just have continued discussion if people are interested. So you're invited to leave, but thank you so much for coming. At the same time, I would love to get people's feedback on something that just came up, and I really want to get the coalition's perspective on the Longmeadow Days festivities. Have been approached for a beer license, liquor license for someone to host. Drinking, I imagine in a tent, hopefully. We don't know the details too closely yet, but I wanted to put this out there as a coalition issue. What's that?
And it was advertised on Facebook. It's One Way Brewing.
By who?
One Way Brewing?
One Way Brewing.
One Way. Are they local?
Yeah, they're in
Yeah, it's in
Disney.
town. It's a
Cool,
it's a
local brewery.
business, but-
So Longmeadow Days has never hosted alcohol. They have hosted root beer.
Yes.
And so I just wanted people's perspective on like, is that something that the coalition should take a stance on? And like, let's keep this a family-friendly event that is substance-free, or should we focus on, hey, if you're gonna have alcohol, let's really focus on keeping it in a very particular area where like kids aren't getting exposed to it, adults getting inebriated. And so I'm curious what people think.
Just for informationally,
Yeah.
it's a different host, and I don't think it's the same name. I think
Yeah, it's not
previously
Library
it was
Days.
Restores Library and
Right.
The
Or it's
Historical
historical
Society.
society, yeah, and now it's the
I
American
believe
Legion.
It's
a different-
DAV, isn't it? I think it's the Disabled American Vets because.
American Legion of Disabled Vets.
Yes, I think it's American Legion and
And
Disabled.
that
Vets.
organization may come from a different place.
Oh, 'cause I think they
Yeah.
probably have a bar.
Dramatically regarding the use of alcohol. They may do things with music and bands and, I don't know. But
Yeah.
just understand that there's a different,
It's not
Different host.
your old-fashioned Long Meadow days.
Right.
different host.
So the event will be different as well,
Right.
but we had somebody who has been a member for a long time of the coalition reach out upset about it and so we're bringing it forward to the meeting as a result, but apparently there was a select board vote last night.
Oh, I didn't know if there was a vote.
Yeah, there was a select board vote last night which gave approval for alcohol at this year's Long Meadow Days, so that'll be like
Oh,
the
so it's
first
already
time.
been done.
It's been done. Yeah, so it's been
Good thing I
done.
know
And
that.
the person was letting us know and was concerned that it would open the way for like other adult public drinking events on the green in particular, or excuse me, losing my voice, and had concerns about like if we want that, for the community. So we thought we'd bring it up because we weren't sure how the coalition felt, and we certainly, because like, for example, we have people concerned, including myself, about like the giant syringe on the shot stop, at the shops.
Shot shop.
Shop. And, and like we were able to, kind of express something from the coalition about why that would be insensitive during the opiate epidemic to have a giant, syringe and.
Nothing's
and-
changed, but at least we shared our.
So we shared our
perspective.
opinion. Paul met with the marketing person from the company, and we were at least able to say, like, hey, we're here. These are the issues we think about, and, like, you might not have thought about this perspective. So with this, like, it could be the kind of thing the coalition could, if we had an opinion, express, and, to the powers that be in the town that are regulating it and saying, this is a consideration for a possible downside of doing this. We could have a stance where we're opposed if we were opposed, or like Paul said, a stance where we say these are safety measures that communities put in place to protect children. It's like, some places will have like a beer garden that's, with a separate entrance, and you have to be 21 to enter it, and like the kids' events are separated from it. So
I imagine that's how they would do it anyway, but it'd be good to
I
check
don't know.
in.
We don't
Yeah.
know.
But I
We have
think
no
we can
idea.
check in. I'm pretty sure I know at least one of the principal organizers of that, someone from town. So I didn't know, because I actually got tagged to volunteer at the kids' activities at that. But I would, certainly.
While the parents are at the beer garden.
Barbara will be
Hopefully not,
babysitting.
but I wonder, I wasn't aware of the beer garden, and, I don't know what the thought process was. And I mean, there probably wasn't, to be quite honest, because this man's in his 80s, He's a
Yeah.
disabled American dad.
I would advocate for not coming out against it, but to take it more
Right.
from the education standpoint
Right.
of like, hey,
We need safety measures.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 How do other people feel if I see some nodding
Yeah,
on that. Is that our
I agree with that.
consensus?
I'm
Like,
against it.
Chris, okay. You want to speak?
As-
Please speak.
Yeah.
Just why, if it's never been an issue, or it's never been part of it,
Right.
why do we need to introduce it now? And it's like a family event, why start now?
But it's a new event, so this is
It's a
totally
new event, but it's
fine
called
any way
Long
they
Meadow
want.
Days.
No, it's called Long Meadow
Yeah.
Fall Festival or something.
And they
Yeah.
talk
Fall
about
festival.
Yeah,
kids'
it's totally
activities and
Yeah.
stuff. It's a
Yeah.
family, it might be a different
It's a
thing,
man.
but I don't see the benefit of it.
Yeah. As a prevention specialist, I am well aware of the negative impact
Right.
of having alcohol at community events.
Mhm.
So like, it's a big prevention measure for coalitions and towns to just look at, all right, what are the public events in town that everyone's invited to? something on the town green would qualify. It's a free event, you just come and go. But then there would be a beer tent. So anything like that that would have alcohol, immediately the norms start to change. Kids being exposed to just adults drinking. And kids are exposed to adults drinking on TV and media and whatever, but there's something about, there's just a bunch of like tiers that kids should not be exposed to regularly, and that's, they shouldn't be exposed to their own parents drinking, but that's, parents are like, well, as long as I'm responsible, blah, blah, blah. But ideally, the outcomes show that if you can try to not do that, that'd be great. You certainly should never be inebriated in front of your kid. And so there's all sorts of other data around public events where drinking is a part of it, and it starts to just completely color the experience for the kids growing up, so that when they're 14, 15, 16, they start to get excited about, this is a thing
Yeah.
that all the adults have been doing for years. I can't wait till it's sort of my time to participate in this, and they'll show up drunk after pre-gaming or whatever. So to have, there's something sacred about town-based community events that are substance-free and family-friendly, because, and I think family-friendly is mutually exclusive from substances at an event, because kids just shouldn't have to worry about substances at family-friendly events, right? And as soon as alcohol is there or any other substance, it's immediately a thing. I mean, adults aren't drinking because it does nothing. They're drinking because it affects them in some way, and they like it, and it makes them feel social, and whatever people's reasons are. But then you start to have, just perfect example for East Hampton, where I live. They have this wonderful cultural arts event, or what I thought it was wonderful, called Cultural Chaos. And it was really cool. There's all sorts of awesome art installations and like physical art and circus arts, and this whole street's closed off. And it was just this awesome idea envisioned by the City Arts Council. And then something happened at some point with all the bars on the street, where like the bars could sort of come into the road, halfway. And now it just feels like Mardi Gras. And it's like, I will never take my kids to this event. And that's sort of what it was supposed to be, a family-friendly arts event. And so like, it's not that anymore. And it's only because of the alcohol. Like now there's a bunch of cannabis stores too, but that street, that first year was just magical, right? It was just so fun. There was like people on stilts and all sorts of juggling. It was just so fun. And then as soon as alcohol became, and that is the pervasive thing up the street now, is like drunk adults for 4 hours in the sun. And so it's a bummer, because when you have little kids, you want to do fun, family-friendly stuff that has great energy. You don't want to worry about them being exposed to adults, particularly taking risks with alcohol. Anyhow.
And there are plenty of opportunities for adults that would like to go drink.
Yeah, there
There's
are
so many great opportunities
Yeah.
for them, but it doesn't need to be at a family-friendly.
Yeah, especially there was something that kind of rubbed me wrong about. Yeah, the Longmeadow Days traditionally was like so earnest and wholesome, and I loved that there was a root beer cart, because it's like so gross watching the kids drink all their root beer and get sick. But it was substance free, it was alcohol free, and so all the parents there, everyone there is just under the influence of just their families and like all the things happening, and there's something just really special about it, and it's something. Anyways,
It's too bad that we found out.
I would offer that those who run on elected positions have a pulse on what the community's acceptance level is.
What is that?
But that's because alcohol's like accepted.
Yeah, total
It's like-
social norm amongst adults.
Yeah, drinking is accepted.
I don't think they're thinking about youth exposure.
Right, they don't.
I'll watch the video of the
This is what
meeting.
I think.
I bet that didn't come up.
Right. I'm sure it didn't at all.
Youth
And it's
exposure
like a
tests.
local,
So that's
Yeah.
where we come in as like
Right.
somebody who has more information that might inform decisions. Like this decision has been made,
Right.
so
Right.
I think at this point, like we can
How to
offer,
make it a
like
better
we
decision.
understand this decision was made. These are some safety measures
Let's do this as
to
responsibly as
protect.
possible.
Yeah, exactly. This is
Yeah.
how you protect young people, and it's probably also there's guidance, I'm sure, that reduces the liability for them as well. That would make them want to like implement safety measures. And then, if we would like to moving forward, or even at this point, we could let the select board know, like, we understand this decision was made, and these are considerations for future decisions. Because I think the person's fear is like, once one person has done this, like everybody's going to be able to do that. I don't know that that's necessarily true, but since it's been done and there's a chance for us to have some input
It's
on
precedent.
it, we could do that. Yeah.
And I immediately, when I found out about it, I was like, oh no, the Pride Festival. Because I was just at the Pride Festival. It was this amazing event, and it was substance-free. And it was so family-friendly and inclusive. And, like, I'm like, someone's going to think, like, this should have a beer tent. And it's just going to ruin it. It's not going to be the same event for families. You know, so, like, I mean, it's going to ruin it for me and my little kids. You know, I don't want to speak for the adults in the community who want to have a great time at a festival.
Well, that's specifically a youth-oriented festival too. Like,
The
you know,
Pride
like it's very youth-oriented. So, so I guess I don't know if we should make a decision. Like, would we like to, I'll break this down. Like, should we let the select board, not the select board, or the organizers know what are some safety protocols that they should put in place?
Yeah, I can look
Would
in
you be
best
in favor of
practices
that?
for community events. Yeah.
Is
And
that
then
something that you can take on, or would you like help from people?
I can take it on, but I'll share before I share it with them. I'm going to share it
Okay.
with the folks in the
Okay.
room and in the coalition, and just ask people for feedback on that letter or whatever.
Right. And then B, this is something I don't know if we need an official vote on it, but like, would we like to, draft like a best practices guidance, to send to our elected officials for future decisions, for them to consider?
Yeah, because
See
I'm
all
sure
heads
they didn't
nodding,
think
yes.
about it at all.
And you already made
About
yourself.
teen alcohol use prevention.
Talk to town.
Organizers,
Okay.
no, weave it
Yeah.
into the culture, like affect the thinking so that in the future,
Right.
maybe decisions are different.
Yeah, I remember.
So
yeah.
is that something, I don't want to put it all on you either, Paul, like.
No,
so
I mean, I
if we-
already have a letter from
He's
something
pretty
else.
passionate about it, I think.
A
he'll be
best
fine.
practices, and then that's something that we can have from the coalition, you know what I mean, like we could, I don't know if we need actual signature, there's like, these,
I'll get 'em.
we're an organization in the community.
I'll ask my board and sector reps to sign.
All right.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Does that make
Thank you
sense?
for listening and sharing. And again, you guys can leave. There's a few more slides on
We're
cannabis.
going
It's gonna
to.
keep going if we-
We're
There's
going to.
cannabis and what is the last one?
Move on.
Cannabis. Oh, cannabis and prescription drugs. Okay. That's it. That's all we have to do.
Oh, that's it.
Cannabis use was going down since 2018, 2019, and again there was a bump up last year. Well over a twofold increase for 10th graders, and
Yeah,
then
I'm surprised by that.
11th grade 19%, so
That's great.
even higher than the 12th graders. Again, no pun intended. And so that's something that we've seen bump up again for
Yours is.
those 10th graders.
Yeah, yours was 11th grade last year.
So they're going to be 11th graders this year, so we'll look at that data. Marijuana impaired driving. So this is something that has been a focus of the coalition for years, but
Every year.
has been on the rise the last year. So the data we have, 17% of students, LHS seniors, I should say, 12th graders, report riding with a marijuana impaired driver in the past 30 days. And then the purple is they were driving impaired under the influence of cannabis in the past 30 days. So that's 17%, someone was driving them, 7% they were the ones driving. And so that is, even with 2021 with drivers, a bump up with people riding. So that's almost 1 out of 5 12th graders
Which-
in the last 30 days,
Wow,
which is a lot.
that is a lot.
I don't know if we have the alcohol impaired driving on the
I don't think I
screen or
included
not,
that.
but we're below that 7 for both, I believe, being a driver and being a passenger. I want to say it's like 4%.
Yeah, they're getting the message with
driven.
alcohol.
Like it is,
Yeah.
so this caught our attention when we started looking, and it was like at 36%. It was like really, really out of sync with like the alcohol impairments.
Yeah, 2018, 1 out of 3 seniors
Yeah.
were in the last
Yeah.
30 days had been in a
I
car with
remember
someone.
that. I went right home.
Well, it's tough.
This is what we're talking about at dinner
It's
tonight.
really tough with cannabis. There's a lot of mixed messages
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
some people say, "Oh, it makes me a better driver. Oh, it helps me focus more." And then there's, which is not true. They think that they can focus more. They think that they're a better driver,
Right.
but they're actually
Yeah.
demonstrably not a better driver. In the studies that University of Washington just finished, what was the other one? The messaging around cannabis and what was I going to say? Cannabis impaired driving, messaging, it helps me drive. Oh, there are no laws on the books to do any sobriety tests, road
Right,
sobriety
yeah.
tests.
Right.
So like and they still don't have that yet.
Have a mechanism.
You can use cannabis and then get behind the wheel, and there's no real way to assess how impaired you are, other than a drug recognition expert, which there's only one in Hampden County. And so it's a big deal to get a DRE to visit an impaired driving law infraction situation. Anyways, there's a lot of mixed messaging. And then cafes are coming up consistently with different municipalities making decisions around like on-site cannabis cafes. So like those sorts of things to me, I'm like, how can you have on-site cannabis use cafes with no way of measuring impaired driving? But that's what some towns are doing. Longmeadow's not doing that quite yet.
Oh, I do have it.
There we go, yeah. Alcohol impaired driving in the past 30 days. So 12th graders are in green, rode in a car with an impaired driver, 11%. 11th graders in the pink, even more for the 11th grade. So that cohort last year, risky cohort, higher than the 12th graders. But yeah, lower than the cannabis impaired. So what can we do about cannabis prevention? The AAA offered last year, a shifting gears curriculum, which is an evidence-based curriculum about marijuana impaired driving. And so they offered to do that for free and to visit the wellness classes at the high school, which I thought was really cool. I think they only visited one class. I want this to be universal if it's something we do in the future, so that every student who ends up getting a driver's license has been exposed to this curriculum. And
The blunt truth.
yeah, I know. Having fun with words.
Awesome.
And then working with retailers. So environmental scans at the cannabis dispensaries that are within a 3 to 4 mile radius of Longmeadow, because we don't have any licensees in town. And then safe storage and distribution. We have these postcards. I left them at the front there. We got them free from Northampton Prevention Coalition. They had like hundreds of boxes of these. But we can drop these off with all of our local cannabis dispensaries, and they can just put these in every single bag that they sell of cannabis product for like a month, so that people just sort of normalize the idea of locking it up, labeling it, letting their kids know it's not safe, keeping it away from pets, those sorts of practices. These are some of the concerns about cannabis. So it's impaired driving. Shelley came up with this slide. THC toxicity, tainted, synthetic, like what's going on with these really, really high potency THC products that people are taking. And then cannabinoid hyperemesis. So this is people that are having a very, very sick reaction to cannabis, high potency cannabis. And cannabis-induced psychosis, which is a real thing in the DSM-5. And then acute toxicity. These are all issues with anyone using high potency cannabis, but in particular we're concerned about youth. Daily use among students was 3% last year, so not nearly as much as that's daily use. So that's not. It's better than 10%, but we would love to see that lower than 3%. Excuse me. So I would love to get people's just opinions on anything to focus on with cannabis. It's tricky because we don't have any dispensaries here, but
They're not very far away.
Yeah, who needs a
Exactly, they're only-
dispensary
they're only
when
a couple
it's like
miles.
every single billboard when you drive through
It's- yeah,
Springfield.
Yes.
So that's something
it
to
is.
talk about is billboards, because there's a whole group of Hampshire County Coalition folks that are starting to track billboard activity. In particular, billboards aren't supposed to be up where some certain threshold is supposed to be above the age of 18, which you can't really prove like anywhere, like how old the drivers are driving past it, right? But so they're trying to figure that out, and so
That's
they're
ridiculous.
looking at school buses, like how many school buses drive by these billboards, and so they can't basically. Anyways, it's like there's very few spots where billboards are not being exposed to too many youth, and so that's supposed to be one of the measures of, appropriateness that the state uses when they look at billboards, but I don't think anyone's paying attention, so that's something that they're tracking. But billboards, anything in particular about billboards that you were thinking?
Every single billboard on 91 and 291.
It is.
It's a
We
lot of
could put the
billboards.
stickies on the billboard.
Yeah.
Sticky boards.
Yeah, you want to have a graffiti campaign? Is that what you're suggesting?
It's interesting. I'm not as concerned about billboards as much as the content of the billboard. So, something that I was sold when they were selling cannabis as a recreational substance in Massachusetts was, we're not going to be advertising to kids. And then the company that delivers, at least where I live, it's just all cartoon images of like these sweet, cute things, and like rocket ships, and it's just like, what is going on? What are you doing? You're like, who are you advertising to? What adult cares about a cartoon rocket ship?
Right.
Like, it just doesn't add up, And like, the weirdest thing about, the addictive substance industry is a lot of this stuff is intentional, and it's just so
But
disappointing.
they try to play dumb.
Right, because like you look at Budweiser, they had this commercial during the Super Bowl with the little puppy. There was like a little puppy during the Super Bowl halftime show, and it like got lost and it found its way with like the Clydesdales, and like it was the most memorable commercial for kids in elementary school. So they asked the elementary kids like, what was your favorite commercial? All of them said this Budweiser commercial. You want to talk about brand loyalty? So like they're already like, I love that Budweiser commercial, and they're like 6 years old. So it's like they know what they're doing. They're not including a golden retriever because like we really want that 58-year-old client to just fall in love with this puppy, you know. So
Because I had a Budweiser towel as a child.
yeah. How many tobacco products did I wanted Joe Camel everything. I didn't smoke, but I was like, I want a Joe Camel hat. I want a Joe Camel t-shirt. They knew what they were doing, you know. So
Just
But
like how
tobacco
clever.
companies can't advertise on billboards anymore. is that
not anymore.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so why can cannabis?
Because
Yeah.
it's supposed to be parity with alcohol, so that was the way the law was written. And
Yeah.
and then my argument is always like, I don't think we manage alcohol
I
very
don't
well.
think we manage
Right.
Yeah, so
right.
like that's the weirdest part about the
Yeah.
law.
Well, and like the cleverness of the billboards, it's 420 feet from the exit.
So there's all
Right.
these puns, right?
Right.
Yeah,
And you're like, okay. And like, I don't know any adult who has a relationship with cannabis that's like, ha ha ha. That's literally only teenagers.
Right,
will
that
see that
think
and be
the
like,
420,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Like I don't know a single adult that thinks that's awesome. So like, you start to look at what is the outcome of these messaging, and it's weird. They're supposed to have only, you know, like, technical names of their establishments should include words like cannabis. I don't even think they can use the word marijuana. So cannabis, they can't have any symbols of cannabis on their storefronts. There's all these like, they're really restrictive. You cannot get into these stores as a minor, which is great. But then you look at all the advertising. And so there's a store in East Hampton right on that same street I was talking about, Cottage Street, where there's a store called The Verb is Herb. And you're like, so herb is like it's not the word cannabis, you know? And so like, so there's stuff like that where I'm like, who's paying attention to this? Because it very clearly states in the law, like, do not have any of your naming or titling or signage have anything to do with like jokes and like puns.
Well, it
and
all is.
Really?
yeah, that's like
Yeah.
all it is. So it's like you have to like catch them and then they'll pull the billboard down. But it just puts it all on us, which sucks. Pardon my language on LCTV. It's just a lot of responsibility for the public to like pay attention to that and be like, I don't like that, and then you have to like make a big stink about it. So that's what the prevention, I guess, community is up to.
I think some of the billboards do like they go like that organic route, like
Mhm.
the,
Healthy.
yeah, like something like,
They're not supposed to
The
mention the
best
word health
leaf
at all.
Wellness.
Right.
The
yeah,
best
what about
leaf.
Theory wellness?
yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely
Yeah.
something about like, I just saw it recently. 'cause
Something
I
was like
passed
Springfield or Chicopee just got a whole lot healthier or something like that. Ludlow just got a whole lot healthier, and there's like
Yeah.
an ad for whatever cannabis. And those, you're specifically not allowed to mention health.
Oh,
Or the health
Yeah.
benefits of cannabis
Well, they-
for a recreational dispensary. So it's like,
Right.
yes, there's people getting away with things, and it's just a bummer to watch it
And
unfold.
if you call them.
I was
they'll
in New
fix
York
it.
City over the summer, and there were weed trucks on every corner.
They finally cracked down on that,
Yeah,
did you
they
see?
did. Yes, they did.
They, like, impounded all of them.
I assumed they were legal. That's how prevalent
That's
they
how
were.
they were
They were
everywhere.
like ice cream trucks with
Yeah,
like
they're
everything
everywhere.
on the sides, and I was like,
Times
wow.
Square.
With
And
music?
I mean, how could they not be legal? Because they were so ubiquitous throughout the city. And then there was an article I read that they were completely illegal, and they were cracking down on them. And it's like hysterical.
How
to
did it
think-
take them so long to crack
Right,
down?
crack.
They're on
I mean, to
Times
crack
Square.
down, like I passed like 1,000 of
Yeah.
them. So
Every
it
time you
was-
saw Elmo, you saw one of those trucks.
But I mean, yeah, there were also like people with card tables on many streets, like with just card tables and chairs with their products out. Like they were not they clearly weren't like licensed
Were
retailers.
there cannabis products?
They
out?
were, basically,
Okay.
yeah, like they were dealers, but they were just out in the open on the card table.
There was some loophole. They were like
Just a
giving away.
random person.
They were giving
with
away
a little,
edibles
a little like sign
for
with
donations or
handwritten,
something.
$10 to $15.
Oh, they were giving away edibles for
Oh,
donations.
And
no,
then
they weren't
asking for
bothering.
donations.
They weren't bothering with any of that. But nobody
Wow.
was stopped.
Wow.
It was really wild, like, and very different. I want to say, like, for all the billboards that we have, like, we somehow we managed to not have that happen in Massachusetts. So-
Yay!
Don't
Yeah.
give anybody the idea.
We didn't have
When
the
we
ice
were
cream
crafting the law in
experience.
Massachusetts, they really kept saying like, "Do not end up like Colorado," which was smart in a lot of ways. But then, of course, we missed a lot of things. Anything else about cannabis prevention or things we should
What
address?
should we know
that-
about Laura Stack? Everybody
Yeah.
here aware of
Oh,
Laura
before we
Stack?
go, yeah,
I
it's
mean,
almost
like,
8:30.
Yeah.
Laura Stack is a nationally renowned speaker on cannabis prevention. She lost her son to suicide. Was he 18?
19.
19. But he was one of those kids that didn't have a relationship with cannabis until later in his teens, and then was using high potency cannabis, and then had, like, basically, psychosis response to it, and eventually, like, pretty quickly was going downhill, and then he took his own life. So, and she was already like a nationally known speaker on. I don't know what she was a speaker on before her son died, and since he's passed away, she's like, I think there's like information I can share about my experience with my son using cannabis. And so she's coming September 30th. She's going to be at the Adult Center from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. We're going to have breakfast and bagels and stuff like that and coffee. So let your friends know if you guys can get a little time away from work in the morning. It would be great to have you join us.
Do you know what the response has been to that so far?
To people wanting to come?
Mhm.
I mean, tons of parents are just interested. I mean,
But through Eventbrite,
Who
who've
has signed
actually
up
gone
on
oh,
on and signed up.
good question. I haven't looked at the.
There's one.
I,
Two.
Yeah.
I,
Oh,
I
there
might,
is
I
No,
can
no,
look.
Shelley has the
I have a couple
Eventbrite.
I can look.
friends.
Hold on.
It's
I
a
don't think it's a
Friday?
lot yet who have actually
I'm
registered.
doing it. I just didn't know I had to sign up.
And I had a
Well,
question.
see,
Good
that's
thing you
encouraging.
mentioned it.
Right, so people, and we have so much capacity there actually that I'm not worried about.
Yeah, but it's good to register because then you know how much food
It's
to
more
bring.
because we're
How many
buying
bagels
food
should
that
we
we want to
bring?
know,
Right, right.
you know.
It's
how
a really
many.
big deal.
So let me see if I can find. But we did have a question from somebody at the Adult Center who said that senior citizens were having trouble with the QR code. I think because we're at the Adult Center, we might get some senior citizens who come to the event and.
Right. Wander over.
And, right, so do we have a way for them to register was the question, and I.
They don't have to. They can
Don't.
show up.
All
Or they
right.
can call me. I think the phone number.
So we have 6 people.
Don't get a
Yeah.
bagel.
Yeah.
Really?
6 people.
6 people signed up so far.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can register?
But we're
I
still.
already did.
She is
I did,
registered.
and
And
I
Chris Rich is
got,
registered.
Me too.
Are you?
a
Okay, I didn't
couple
see
of
your name yet.
people, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think Joanne Burke
Mhm.
is
Oh,
going to
great.
come, and
There's the QR code, everyone. Everyone at home, you take a picture of your TV screen, and that's the Laura Stack event.
So feel free to
Yeah.
post it in your circles. We are circulating it in networks, and I think if we can get Marty to send it out to all parents again, that would
Yeah.
like otherwise, because I think it came from principals
Mhm.
and not from. And I don't even know if the middle school principals sent anything out regarding. Are
Not
you a
yet,
middle school
no.
parent? Do you know if you got anything?
I got something. I
You
don't
did?
remember.
I'm
I
not
don't
unaware
remember.
of the name, and it's
Okay.
through emails, but
All
I
right.
don't remember what I
Okay.
got.
It probably wasn't.
I'm
for
just
the
not sure.
principals.
I don't get the middle school emails, so I don't know what goes out to the middle schools.
Cool.
So.
Oh, I think I.
So anyway, we
And
still have a week and a
perhaps
half.
people just
and
didn't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people do tend to sign up
Too.
late, so
Yeah.
I don't think.
Middle school's got it too.
Okay, great.
I like
Or at least
Laura
Williams
Stack's
did.
approach to talking about cannabis because it's really a focus on contemporary cannabis, which is
Mhm.
like just very different from like the 70s and 80s. And I think there's a lot of parents that aren't quite as caught up on like how much more potent cannabis is now. So she just really addresses that discrepancy, which I think is useful.
Well, it was amazing for me too, because I took, after watching all of those videos, I brought that up with several groups with a gentleman I'm working with. And I think I showed a couple of clips, and I said, I just want to talk about it. What do you think? And they're like, oh, I never use that. These are opiate users. I'll never use that stuff. It makes me absolutely nuts. Which was really kind of interesting. But there were several people who just, several folks who were in a substance treatment program who spoke about just the amount of THC and the effects that it, that I get very paranoid, that I get very, very anxious. And I know that's not everybody's experience, and I know that, it does have medical uses, but I'm talking about a population that's not using it in that manner. And I was surprised because I expected to get a lot of flack.
A lot of pro.
Yeah, you
Pro
don't know
high
what you're
THC.
talking about, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Conversation is good, so.
Well, we didn't talk about opiates or prescription drugs in particular, but we're doing work on that. If you have any feedback about that, I'd love to hear from you. So shoot me an email, paul@closecommunity.org. I just met with the Realtor Association of Pioneer Valley this morning and did a presentation about keeping open houses safe from people.
Ooh, that's so smart,
Yeah, well, we've been
Paul.
working on it for years and we
It's
never
taken
got
so
in.
long, you
But we
wouldn't
finally
believe.
got into their training, so that's
Really?
yeah.
One of the founding members of the coalition had this as her passion. She's not even in the
5 years
coalition
ago.
anymore.
That is so
finally,
smart.
It
finally,
happened.
it's great.
And then we do our Narcan trainings and the prescription drug takebacks in October 29th. Anywho, so that's our meeting for the night.
Now that I'm-
Our next meeting, we're shooting for December 20th at 7 p.m. right here, week before Christmas. But thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being here. Thanks again to LCTV for hosting us. Anything
And
else,
I
Shelley?
think it's fair to say, like, some of these things have nitty-gritty tasks involved. So I would love, like, if Paul, did you want to say anything about that?
No, I
Or you
just
want me to say it?
completely
Okay.
missed that.
Yeah,
time
so like
piece.
sometimes, like if it's like, oh, who wants to bring such and such to a dispensary? Like, we have these that can be dropped off. Like, if there are things like that.
Oh, yeah.
I think if we
I
put
need
it
help.
out to all of our sector reps, not just people in the room, but I think it would be great to have some of those tasks so that it's not all like Paul running around. Like, we kind of talk about the ideas and then Paul ends up, even though I gave you 2 other things to do
Yeah,
in
thanks a
the
lot,
course of
Shelley.
the meeting. I think, it would be great, like, if there are things, please don't be afraid to delegate and like reach out and say,
Yeah,
hey, is
sign
there
up
anybody
genius,
willing
I
to
think,
Makes us
helps
feel
before.
useful.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So like something, yeah. So,
Okay.
because a number of these things I can think have specific things that somebody could do.
Yeah,
that are,
especially-
like,
this
time,
is such a perfect
time
one.
limited, discrete. Yeah, like that was an easy one that came to mind.
Easy.
Even like, Big Y Express, keep an eye. Like I was in there last week and they are still selling on the synthetic nicotine pouches. The federal government said they're supposed to be off the shelves by July 11th, but they're still in our Big Y Express.
Oh, I
So like
forgot
we
about that.
we
Did you
have
call Beverly?
Beverly's not there anymore, but we have Finn McCool.
Finn McCool.
So we are
New
in
health
touch
director.
with Finn McCool.
Finn McCool.
Are we still on air?
We are. Hi, Finn. Yeah,
So we're gonna meet with Finn soon.
I'll be sharing a sign-up genius for particular strategies that I'd love some support with, so keep your eyes peeled on your email. Thanks so much for coming, guys.
All right.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you.
Take care. Thanks for watching on LCTV.